Welcome everyone to another series in our DonorSearch Flash class. We are thrilled to have you here today. This is Ryan Ponzerk, the marketing manager. So I know you're used to having some music that Jay will play for you, and you're not getting the music today, unfortunately. And you're also going to have to hear a little bit of a different voice, but I'll do my best not to put you to sleep beforehand. So what we'll do before we jump into this is we'll take a few minutes to go through the platform to make sure everyone's comfortable and has an understanding of where to go to ask questions and be interactive throughout the presentation. So we'll jump into that a little bit, but for now, if you want to grab your colleagues, grab a drink, get comfortable, we'll come right back in a minute and we'll get this thing started. Hello again, everyone. This is Ryan Ponzerk, the marketing manager here at DonorSearch. Proud to bring you another great presentation in the 2018 Flash Class series. And before we jump into the presentation and get to the main event, we'll go ahead and do some housekeeping, as we always do. So first things first, everyone asked if they'll be sent out the slides and where they can get a copy of the recording. For the recording, you'll be able to go to the DonorSearch website. That's www.donorsearch.net. And as you can see here under the Resources tab, you'll see a tab for Flash Class Library. All of our Flash classes are recorded and posted there. So within a few days after this presentation, you'll be able to go there and see this recording of the presentation once more. As far as the slides go, you will also have access to those. Those will be coming directly from our presenter today, Jay Love, so be on the lookout for those, and you should have those as well in the next few days. Also, we want this to be as interactive as possible. While your mics are muted and you won't be able to call in, just for whatever reason, if there's dogs barking in the background, if you have construction going on like we have here, we want to make sure that everyone's able to hear the presentation. But we want you to be asking questions throughout. So if you see the control panel on your screen, if you go into the questions tab at any point during the presentation today, please type your questions. Jay will be answering those throughout the presentation. So if you have something that you want answered right then and there, we will be answering those throughout the presentation. Today's Flash class is the Art and Science of Effective Gift Acknowledgements. If you weren't expecting to be in this webinar, you'll probably still want to stick around because it's a great topic with a great presenter. And with that, I'm going to jump in. Jay Love is a CRO and co-founder of Bloomerang. He has served this sector for 34 years and is considered the most well-known senior statesman whose advice is sought constantly. He has been the CEO of 4 companies serving the sector. He's a graduate of Butler University, and over the years, he has given more than 2,500 speeches around the world for the charity sector and is often the voice of new technology for fundraisers. He is a current member of the AFP Ethics Committee and former member of the AFP International Board. He was the founding chairman of NPower Indiana, founding member of TechPoint Foundation, and founding member of the AFP Business Member Council. He is a former board member at the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University and Gleaners Food Bank. Jay currently serves on the board of Conner Prairie Interactive History Park, the Butler University Innovation Fund, and the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. He is also on the board of several technology companies. He and his wife, Christy, the former executive director for the Lawrence Township Schools Foundation, served as co-chairs for the Indianapolis-Fort Harrison YMCA 2011 capital campaign and are the proud parents of 3 children as well as 6 grandchildren. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Jay Love.
Hey, thanks very much, Ryan. I appreciate it here. Let me bring my screen up so we've got everybody seeing the right things here. Let's see if we can get that in the mode here. And is that coming up okay, Ryan?
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
Excellent. As I've done in the past when I've been delighted to be part of the presentation series for the Flash classes, if you've got a question as we go along, just chat that in to Ryan. He will let me know, or I'll stop occasionally and see if there's any questions that have come up. But we will be glad to take the questions as we go along. We find that is the most effective to do. And if it's something I'm going to be covering, I'll refer that to a little bit later. Otherwise, we'll see if we can get those handled for you as we go along. For that, Ryan did a good job covering all my background. Only addition is I'm up to 7 grandchildren now, so that's why I wanted to make sure and show the picture there. But delighted to be involved, as active as I am with so many different nonprofit organizations, both as customers and as board and as a board member and other activities too. One of the things that I don't know whether Ryan mentioned or not, I had the recent experience of being the chair of the AFP Ethics Committee also. So that was a great 2-year period being involved heavily with that aspect of the AFP organization. So why focus on the gift acknowledgement? Why is that important for everybody here today to take a look at? Well, when we take a look at why donors no longer stay with us, why they lapse, you'll see that the gift acknowledgement process and everything else that surrounds that is a big part of that happening. So let's take a look at this study that was done by Dr. Adrian Sargent, who, by the way, if you type in the words donor loyalty or donor retention into Google, Adrian is what pops up on the first page as being sort of the worldwide authority on those matters. So in his landmark study that he did, why nonprofit donors leave, you can see the various aspects here. And I'm going to highlight some of them in red there. When you take a look at most of the items listed there, the donor communications and donor acknowledgement process has a very big factor in it. As you can see there, 5% thought the charity did not need them. 8% had no information on how the monies were being used. 9% no memory of supporting. 13% never got thanked for donating. 16% there was a death involved, so they no longer could donate. But then we had the higher ones there of poor service or communications, 18%, 36% felt others weren't deserving. And then the largest one was 54% could no longer afford. But when you look at all the ones highlighted in red there, you can see that those all track back to the acknowledgement process and any other communications that happen after the gift has been made. So let's look on the other side of this and take a look what our friends at Donor Voice say about why people stay loyal. What adds up to the factors of donor loyalty? And donors were asked that and given a list of 32 reasons to choose from. I'm going to list for you the top 7 of those. And just like I did before, try to see how many of those 7 really tie back to the donor acknowledgement process. Number 1, donor perceives the organization to produce outcomes. That may or may not be tied directly to the acknowledgement process. Donor knows what to expect with each interaction. Donor receives a timely thank you. Donor receives opportunities to make their views known. I've got that highlighted because we're going to talk a little bit more in just a minute about the use of surveys and how that can add to the gift acknowledgement process in a very, very important manner. Donor feels like they're part of an important cause. Number 6, donor feels like his or her involvement is appreciated. And then number 7, the donor receives info showing who is being helped. As you can see, all of these tie back in some way, shape, or form to the gift acknowledgement process. But there are those 3 that are outlined in red there that really specifically are driven almost entirely by the gift acknowledgement process. So now that we know how that comes into play there, let's talk about how it applies toward donor retention. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, Dr. Sargent is very involved with all the research on donor retention. And what we have seen is the nonprofit world, unlike the commercial world, still has not been able to get the average donor retention above 45 to 50%. Most nonprofits more than half of the donors in any one year do not come back to give in the next year. And if they happen to be a first-time donor, like you see in the second bucket there, then nearly 7 out of 10 do not come back and give the second year. And what you can see is once the gift acknowledgement process is working and they become a repeat donor, or even better, a monthly donor, all of a sudden those retention percentages get up to much more respectable levels. Compare that to the commercial world, where the average customer retention is what you see over there in the monthly column. It's 90% or more for most commercial businesses that retain their customers. So let's jump into talking a little bit more about why this gift acknowledgement process is so important. If you think that going back and trying to recapture a lapsed donor is going to help the situation, what we have seen over the last 5 years is the ability to do that is shrinking every year. It's gone from almost 7% down to almost a pure flat 5%. So that ability to recapture somebody after the fact is not going to be much of a help. So we're faced with one of two alternatives: either continually bring in brand new donors, or see if we can have an effect on keeping the donors that we have. And one of the biggest effect is the gift acknowledgement process. So the last bit of statistics I wanted to share before we talk about some of the things that we can be doing is the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. Is the compilation of all the donor database data from across the country. 2018 is raising several sort of warning flags for us at the present time. Through the first 6 months of this year, the total donors across the country were down 6.6%. The new donors being added to the databases was down over 9%. The new retained donors were being retained at 18% lower level. The retained donors was a much better story, but still less than the percentage we were before. And the overall retention, which we were looking at over here at being 45%, at the present rate, that's going to drop down below 40% for 2018 unless the second half of the year improves drastically. So, Ryan, before I move on to talking a little bit about what effective gift acknowledgements look like, are there any questions that have come in so far? And I'll pause and take a drink of water while you're checking.
Yes, in reference to the last slide that you were talking about, where the retention rates are dropping even more, Gary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're wondering why the case was for that.
Well, we think that there was as the tax law changes, unless people were able to do the charitable deductions, that there might have been people that moved some of their 2018 giving into the latter half of 2017 for that. And then I honestly think that some of the things we're going to be talking about are having an impact on that too. The lack of proper donor communications is not allowing these donors to feel like they're still part of the organization. So some of the donation levels are all being affected by this. So we'll see. Now, the final quarter of the year could make a huge difference and bring these back up, but I just wanted to let people know through the first half of the year that the signals are not going in the right direction at all. Any other questions, Ryan, that have come up so far?
Yeah, we have one. How prompt would the donor expect to be thanked after their donations?
That's a very good question. We're going to come to that in just a few moments, so I'm going to save it for then when I have an illustration of that that'll be up on the screen.
Okay, and we just had one more comment, and that was from Bobby, and it was touching on the first question. But she had mentioned that someone or a donor that she had talked to was one of the reasons they gave. She doesn't like the way the stock market is going, so she gave 50% of her usual gift. So
okay, that is a potential reason that we're seeing. Although the stock market for most of the year has been pretty kind to all of us, so the last week or so has not been so great, but at least that's been good. Yeah. So anyway, let's talk about what does an effective gift acknowledgement look like. All right. Some things to keep in mind for effective gift acknowledgements. First of all, they are segmented. And when I say segmented, what do I mean by that? What are some easy methods to segment your gift acknowledgements? I'll show you what my favorite method is here in just a slide or so of how you can break it down into 5 or 6 segments that would make it a way to personalize each one of those groups. Next, it speaks to the impact of the gift. I'll show some examples of that. It's donor-centered. Now, you can sometimes put the focus on your organization or your impact or perhaps even your CEO in a few cases or something of that nature. But for the most part, the best gift acknowledgements focus in on the donor and what the donor's gift has done for your organization. They're not always tied to recent gifts. I'm going to show you some research where if you can thank people for volunteering and for other activities, or just to say that you were thinking of them, that can have a very positive impact on the giving in the future. Some of the things that other key aspects of effective gift acknowledgements, they look to the future, not just the near term. So they're talking about what the impact and what your organization is going to be able to do a little bit longer out. They ask for feedback. Some of the very best gift acknowledgements are part of a 2 or 3 step cadence, where one of the steps is where we ask for feedback from the donors, and that has a tremendous effect that we'll be talking about. I'm going to show you a couple really good examples about that in a minute. They're multi-channel, so you have the ability to reach out and thank people not only by a thank you letter, but you can also do that by a thank you email, a text, a phone, a video, etc. And sometimes when they're used in combination, such as a thank you letter followed by a thank you phone call, that can have a very, very large impact. But most importantly, all of these effective hints here are tied into a documented communications cadence. So what do I mean by a cadence? Well, what we're talking about is for any gift that comes in, unless it's a monthly recurring donor, we want to make sure that we have 2, 3, maybe even 4 touches in the next 3 to 6 months after the gift comes in as part of a communication cadence. So let me share some examples of that as we go through here. First of all, talking about segmentation. When we talk about segmentation here, what we have in this case here, the line going across the middle horizontally is the average gift size. So we've got segments 2, 4, and 6 that are above the average gift size, and then segments 3, 5, and 7 are below the average gift size. And so what we have, segment 1, which is not shown here, are people that have never given, and then we have segment 2, which are people that have given once over a year ago, above the average gift, then below that, and then people given once within the last year, and then of course our favorite people, the donors that have given multiple times, segment 6 and 7. What you want to do with your team is sit down and take a look at each segment and the dollar amounts that are involved and say, what are going to be my follow-up steps and my communication cadence with each of these individual segments? For instance, segment 2 and 6, perhaps. This is somebody that's come back and they're giving you above your average gift amount. Maybe that deserves a phone call from not just anybody, but maybe a phone call from your CEO or your executive director. And of course, segment 6 here, people that have given multiple times, maybe every second or third time that they give, maybe that one would necessitate and beg for a phone call from the executive director or the CEO to help make that happen too. So those are just some sample segments you can use. I'm hoping all of you are doing something other than one single type of thank you letter or thank you acknowledgement email that surfaces all the gift types. You can break it into groups here. Some other items to keep in mind as you're designing your communication cadence. Try to design a style or story for each segment. So in addition to the number that you're going to have and what they are, maybe there's a particular style or story for that. I'll show you some examples of that, of what some organizations have done for first-time donors. Handwritten notes and PSs are quite powerful. One of the things that you'll find when you use a handwritten notes, many times those are kept forever. They make a tremendous impact. And even if it's just a handwritten PS on a typewritten letter, it makes a huge difference, and it separates yourself from all of the other nonprofits that many of your donors are also giving to. One of the ways that you can make it help it improve over time is to do your own testing. So you can pick a segment, like I have up on the screen. Let's say we want to pick segment 5, and we want to try 2 different methods. We'll keep doing what we've been doing, but maybe instead of a typewritten label of some nature on our thank you, maybe we want to make it a handwritten address for that, and see if that gets opened and if it has an impact on the retention level of that donor in the future. So you can do various testings, but one of the easiest ways is each time you're doing an appeal and a set of thank yous, pick a different segment and help try 2 or 3 different alternatives there. Personalize as much as possible. One of my favorite ways that I have found that has an impact on my wife and myself, if you can say in the thank you letter or the thank you email, what is the total amount of lifetime giving that the person has made to your organization? You can then be talking about more than the impact of just their most recent gift or the most recent 2 or 3 gifts. You can talk about the impact they've had on your organization since they first became a donor. And I always love when they talk about, when I get thank you letters, it says, you know, over the last 15 years, your family has supported us to this level, and these are the projects that we have completed as a result of that. Keep in mind, for every gift that comes in, you want to have 3 touches in the first 90 days. And if it's a brand new donor, this should be written in stone, that there should be 3 touches in that first 90-day period for that new donor. Always try to convert people to monthly donors, so make sure that some aspect of your gift acknowledgement process does talk about the fact that they have the option of becoming a recurring or a monthly donor with your organization. And get with your entire team and make sure you have everybody together so that you can make sure that it fits into an overall communication plan. So Ryan, did those suggestions or those segments raise any questions that have come up so far?
So we do have a question. It goes back more towards retention rates. And Marie asked, when you were discussing the retention rates, is that from year to year? For example, if someone gives and skips a year, are they retained or a new donor?
Yes, and those are based upon your 12-month period. So if you're running on a fiscal year that's different than a calendar year, that may be, for instance, July 1st one year to July 1st of the next year. But the way the retention is figured, and it's a real simple little formula. You take the number of donors that you have in any 12-month period, and that becomes your denominator of a fraction. So if you've got, for instance, 1,000 donors, that would be the bottom number. The top number is how many of that exact 1,000 gave again anytime in the next 12 months. So you don't get to count new donors. You don't get to count recaptured lapsed donors that were more than a year ago. It's just how many of those 1,000 corporations and individuals and foundations gave again in the next 12 months. And for instance, if 475 or 470 of those, to make the math easier, of 1,000 gave, that would be 470 over that. That would be a 47% donor retention rate. Any other questions, Ryan?
Yes. Bobby asked for the 3 contacts or the 3 touches within the first 90 days. You mentioned the letter, the phone call, and she was wondering if there was another recommendation for.
Well, as you can see in the parentheses there, if it's a brand new donor, a very brief little survey at the end of the 90 days would help out nicely there and would round out that 3rd touch for it. Think about it. Any of you that are out there listening today, and I know we've got 300 or 400 of you that are part of the webinar today. If you've ever purchased a new car, a new truck, a new phone, a new air conditioner, a new refrigerator, stayed at a hotel, you are going to get a survey, not within 90 days, but probably within 30 days, asking you your satisfaction for the transaction and the interaction that you just had. And the reason being, the commercial world has really figured out that just the mere fact of us asking you for your opinion makes an impression. And if someone does answer that survey, they are 3 or 4 times more likely to purchase again from that commercial business than they are if they had not done that. And remarkably, the nonprofit world really hasn't figured this out. Just for an example, my wife and I support about 14 or 15 organizations every year with annual gifts. In the last 3 years, there has only been 3 out of the 15 organizations that have ever sent my wife and I any sort of a survey about our opinion of our interactions with them, what projects we would like to support, what manner we would like to, how we'd like to be communicated with. There's only 3 out of 15 that has done that. And I think you can probably think about that yourself and see. So that's 3 of them. Some other touches that you can keep in mind besides a phone call, a letter, and a survey, sending someone a copy of your newsletter, inviting them to an event, a personal visit, a text message. There's, probably 30 or 40 different types of 3 types of touches that you can keep in mind that you could use. Ryan, any others before we move on?
Yes, this one actually comes from another Ryan. And
okay.
He says he works at a small private college, and we often have gift officers send separate thank you notes, emails, or make calls. Should the gift acknowledgement letter be signed by a higher up, such as a VP or college president? Are these supplemental thank yous preferable to PS messages?
Any additional type of communication is preferred. As far as who's signing it, if I love the fact that your college is using the gift officer that's in the process of building a relationship with that alumni or with that donor, and I think the fact that they're signing that is a great way of continuing to build that relationship and makes it much easier to have a handwritten PS. Now, if it's not someone that's been assigned to that major gift officer, then I would try to get as high up the food chain as you can as far as who's signing that letter. That would be great. Great question there, Ryan. Thank you. All righty, let's show you some examples here. This is a private school that does kindergarten up through the 6th grade, called the Oaks Academy. And anytime you're a first-time donor, and I encourage you all to make a gift and watch this happen, you get a little thank you card that compares your first gift to the first day for a student, the first memories, the first field trip, etc. It lets you see through the student's eyes who's getting the scholarship as a result of your first gift, and they compare your first gift to other first things that are happening for the students. I thought it was a very neat little way of doing it, and it also really distinguishes this organization from a lot of the other private schools, how they go about doing their thank yous for the first ones. The next one here is where you can see not only did we get the thank you letter, but we also got a thank you note that arrived a week later. And this was from an actual organization. You can see how they went about doing that. The first one sort of serves as the tax receipt. Also, the second one is truly just thanking them and making it a little bit more personal, as you can see with the handwritten note. One of the ways to make sure that you are creating that gift acknowledgement plan is to make sure it's part of your overall donor retention communication plan. I put this slide in here because it's from a good friend of mine with Ignited Fundraising, and as you can see, it shows you several different ways of communicating over a longer time period. So you can see everything from 3 days out to 6 weeks, out to 2.5 months, etc. And then who is responsible and what type of format. And this is a way that you can sit down with your team and sort of define what is our communication cadence or our communication plan so that we can make that happen. So just an example there that you can all keep in mind. So when we talk about donor communications and the gift acknowledgement in particular, I always lean on a good friend of mine, Tom Ahern, who functions as our donor communications head coach here, on if you want to help improve your gift acknowledgement letters and emails immediately, what are a couple, 3 things that you all can do? So I always love if you can finish one of these 1-hour webinars and go away with 2 or 3 items that you can put to use right away. That really makes this hour a success for us. And I love what Tom helped us design here at Bloomerang. We do something called the Ahern audit. Now, we make it real simple and easy for people to do that, but you can also make this happen yourself. When you click on this button, it performs 2 tests simultaneously for you that each of you can do, whether you're using a database or not. I'm going to refer to the bottom here. The first one is the Fleisch-Kincaid reading level test. We know that the best donor communications are written at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level. And what this checks to see by administering what's called the Fleisch-Kincaid reading level test, we see if we're writing it too low or if we're writing it too high. Now, most people, if they use a committee or they send it on up the ladder to have someone approve and edit your gift acknowledgement letter, it usually moves the grade reading level up way, way, way too high. And it's not as effective as doing it in this manner. So this is something, if you're using a commercial word processor, it's one of the drop-down buttons that you can check and see and make sure that that is fitting into that right level. Now, the one up above here is where we check to see what we call the U test, which is basically just counting the pronouns. And we see how many pronouns are specifically addressing the donor versus addressing yourself or your organization. So the goal we want is twice as many you words and we words than using about us. So you want to see if you get a 2-to-1 ratio coming out of that. And it's a quick way to take a look at all of your current gift acknowledgement communication devices and see if they would pass both of these tests. It's a wonderful way to improve them almost immediately for you. So let's take a look here at some. These are ones that have passed the U test with flying colors. Look at the first 2 sentences here. Dear Terry and Mark, you are magnificent. Your gift to this education foundation supports so many things. Your commitment to quality, etc. Notice how we're putting the donor front and center here in helping them be aware of how much of an impact that they're having. Another way that you can do this is to make it easy for people to share it on social media. If you're sending out an email thank you, not only do you want it to fulfill the 2 tests that we talked about, but also you want to make it easy to share. As you can see here, this thank you coming from College Mentors for Kids allows someone to very easily share that on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn by just clicking on one of the 3 large buttons at the bottom of the email. I love personalized videos. In this particular case, the fundraising executive at this organization just recorded a little 30-second video and attached it to an email and sent it out for it. When you get the slides, you can click on it and you can listen to it. But as you can see, this was for homeless youth, and they gave a very personalized message and let them know, the person know, Stephen in this case, exactly what those dollars were going to be used for. I'm going to pause there, Ryan. Any questions on those examples before I talk a little bit about the use of surveys here?
Yes, and Marie had a question, and she asked, can you share information on gift in kind, gift acknowledgements, and what is required and what is recommended?
I would check with with an attorney on that to make sure, or your state to make sure that there's not any unique requirements that are going to be part of that. If there's a gift in kind, that usually is going to have some sort of a description and value associated to it, and then some sort of reasoning behind that for it. So I don't have today any examples of gift in kind. I wish I'd put a couple of those in there, but that's usually the pattern that they follow, is listing a value and then saying how they arrived at that value for that, and then I would bounce that off of the legal counsel that you're working with at your particular organization. Any other questions, Ryan?
Yes. This one, let me. There we go. John, he asked, how long after a lapse do you continue to pursue a larger than average multiple gift donor?
If they're above the average gift amount, I think you want to continue the communications. There should not be a limit on that. What I would try to do, and it's a good segue into what we're talking about, I would try to do a survey of that person to ask if they would like to continue to receive your communications no less than once every 3 years, preferably every other year. Because you may have somebody that their financial situation has changed, and you hear story after story when I'm out speaking in person of someone that gave an above average gift and that did not give anything for the next 10 years and all of a sudden left $1 million in an estate gift. So until you're notified that the communication should stop, I would keep the communication going, with the caveat of reaching out every once in a while to see if you could survey them and find out, what type of communications they would find best, and see if there's anything they want to make you aware of, because any survey should include a free-form comment area, as you'll see here. Any additional questions, Ryan?
Yes, and this one goes back to the HERN audit. Can you explain again how to add this to my word processing program?
Yes. If you're using Microsoft Word, the drop-down menus, one of them will be a grade reading level test, or what they call the Flesch-Kincaid test. And what you do is you highlight the document that you want scanned, and then click on that drop-down menu, and it will specifically tell you the number of words and the grade reading level for you. So give it a try. You should be able to make that come about without any problem at all. Okay, let's move on here. This is from one of my favorite organizations that I support, a group called Charity Water, for that. And this is their email that came back to one of my associates for a thank you, a recurring gift here. They welcome them to the recurring gift program. And if you'll notice on the right-hand side, there's two little words in blue there called Quick Survey. And what they ask right as someone becomes a new donor for them of any type, how would you rate your experience of getting your update about the donation? And you can list that. What was your favorite or least favorite part of free-form comment area? And how likely are you to donate to Charity Water again? And you've got very likely, likely, not sure, probably not likely, and definitely not likely. What each one of these buttons that you press do, think about what they're doing on their back end. That moves you into a different segment with a different communication plan. For instance, I'm going to guess anybody that's in the somewhat dissatisfied or very dissatisfied up at the top there is going to get a personal outreach by somebody that can help make the situation better. And each one of these types here, is, if you look down at the bottom, that would denote a different type of communication cadence that we would follow up on based upon how they answered their survey. And like I said, you can all think of, I'm sure all of you have received a survey on your smartphone sometime in the last 30 days from a commercial enterprise or business that you've done business with in some manner. But can you say the same? Have you received a survey from any nonprofit you've had an interaction with in that same 30-day period? So let's take a look at 3 sort of more advanced gift acknowledgement experiments that were just released. I have the good fortune of working very closely with the Hartsock Center for Sustainable Philanthropy. They're based in the UK, and one of the persons that is involved with the research project is Dr. Shang for that. And we're going to share the results from 3 sort of wildly different organizations: the Brady Campaign for Gun Control, Planned Parenthood, and Iowa Public TV. And we're going to see how certain gift acknowledgement functions came into play and the results that came from that. Now, I'm going to do a little spoiler alert here and say everything we're going to see from these 3 most recent bits of research that were just conducted in the last 12 months supports what we've been talking about already. So what the research goals for these projects were: should we be thanking our donors for their gift, or for the difference they made, or the kind of person that they are, or the kind of person that they would like to be? How do these approaches make people feel, and what is the optimal point in which one of these approaches makes the biggest difference in success as far as the donor returning time after time and time to support us? And I love one of the quotes from the research project: "It's not just thanking me, it's kind of loving on me." And that's the happy participants that were part of this said that they really felt like that was the case with one or more of these 3 organizations. So let's talk about the key findings from the Brady campaign for that. They changed their thank you letter around, reaffirming the differences that their donations made, and for that, without changing the control group for that. So they really put an emphasis on this is the specific differences in the specific projects that you were able to have an impact on. And in this particular case, it increased the average gifts in the subsequent donations by 60% by doing that. The other things that they found is they sent thank you letters to people that were previous donors in previous years that had lapsed, so they don't have to donate for them to be thanked. That had a positive impact. As we said, they reaffirmed the difference that their donations made. They focused on trying to have wording that helped make the donors feel good about their giving. If there was leadership involved that they knew, or that someone that they had a relationship with, they brought that into the acknowledgement and communication process. Stories with little emotion had a short-term impact on giving. Stories with high emotion had long-term impact from that. So that was some of the results from the Brady campaign. What we did with the experiment with Planned Parenthood was they actually sent a thank you letter out thanking them for their previous gift a few weeks before the next appeal letter was to go out. Sort of priming of the pump. Half of the people got that, half didn't. And I'm just going to sort of ask you here, you can think about it. It's a question here. Which group do you think gave more to the subsequent appeal? And I bet most of you are going to have the correct answer here. So this is how it was. Condition 1, they got a thank you for their last donation made, and condition 2 was that no thank you was made for them. And as you can see, the average gift amount almost doubled. It was a 67% increase in the giving there for that, by just sending out a thank you for their previous gift a few weeks before the next appeal letter went out for that. And I don't know whether any of you have tried that particular approach, but this was a pretty significant finding of the study. The third and final one, then we'll open it up for questions here, was regarding Iowa Public TV. What effect can centering the thank you letter on the CEO or the donor have on renewal rates? which one is better? So this is an example here. The CEO-centered letter really talked a lot about a CEO that was very well known in the Iowa public TV market in this particular city for that. And the other one talked a little bit more about the donor, and you can see the example that was given there. The donor-centric one in this case did win, as you might guess, but it wasn't by that much because in their case they had a very well-known CEO. So it did not work as much against them as it would have been talking about someone else in the organization that had not been in that place and in that role for a long period of time. So it's okay to utilize leadership in your appeals and thank yous if that person is well known. The longer the donor is given, the more effective a letter that speaks to the personal relationship that the donor has had on the impact. And so talking about that impact early on in that relationship really made a nice difference in the level of giving that was being done. So another quote that I had here: if the donor does not feel adequately thanked, the acknowledgement has failed, even though it may produce a second gift. And that was one of the things that the research study brought out, is that someone may give again, but they may not be a long-term donor, and they may not ever fit into an upgrade path with your organization to be able to be moved to higher and higher levels of giving. So before I run into that, any questions over those three studies, Ryan, that have come through from our audience?
Yes, we had one from Clara, and she wanted to know, did Planned Parenthood send an initial thank you after the first gift and then a follow-up thank you before the appeal time, or just one thank you before appeal?
No, they did a original thank you note that went out just a day or two after the original gift, and then prior to the next appeal, a few weeks before, they did send a second thank you letter as part of the experiment. Any other questions?
That was it for that section. We had a few questions from before.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a minute then. We'll use that to prime the pump for our end of the session Q&A period here, Ryan, then. So some final thoughts. Overall, you want to be donor-centric, but don't be afraid to utilize very well-known staff members or people that are involved with providing the impact for your mission. Donor-centric always beats organization-centric. And keep in mind that thanking before asking is not a bad idea. It gives you a chance to do that for someone that's been a previous donor, or even someone that's been a volunteer or been involved in some other capacity. Thanking them for that involvement always leads to a stronger and tighter relationship. All righty. Some other resources to keep in mind. DonorSearch has a wealth of resources. We at Bloomerang also do too, with some of the things that are on our website. I wanted to point out that there is, within our resource session, a donation thank you email template and a donation thank you regular mail or snail mail template that you can keep in mind and use, that we have on file there for you. And if you did want to dig into the donor-centered, we also have an ebook that goes into many of the other concepts associated with being a donor-centered gift acknowledgement process. So with that in mind, why don't we open it up, Ryan? You want to go ahead and bring up a couple of those questions we didn't get a chance to get to earlier?
Absolutely, and thanks for a great presentation, Jay. And the first question we had was from Rebecca, and this goes back to the amount of touches. Can you give too many touches after a gift?
I think you can, but it's going to take a lot to get there. I think if you are finding a unique and different touch, something once a month in some way, shape, or form is not going overboard during the first 3 or 4 months. And then after that, I think it can be paced out into something more of an every other month or every third month, unless someone is asking you for some, or as requested, more frequent updates. Now, the best way to find that out, because this is different from one donor to the next, is to do some sort of a survey and ask, for them. Now, I would hesitate asking this question until they've been a donor with you for at least 2 years. Only after 2 years do they have a feel for what your communication processes are like. So after 2 years, you can ask how often they would like to hear from you. Anytime before that would probably be a bit premature.
Okay. And the next question has to deal with personalization. What would you recommend for smaller shops who might have a higher influx of donations coming in? What are some ways to make it more scalable to personalize every thank you and follow-up touch?
Utilize as many staff members, interns, and volunteers for this process. And those volunteers can include your board members. They can include various committee members. You can even have a gift acknowledgement committee or advisory board, group that can be part of it. Any personalization that can be done through that. Also keep in mind that the technology that you're using should allow that personalization to take place in that manner too. So you can refer to the project that they're supporting, lifetime giving, like I mentioned a little bit before, utilizing other members of their household that are involved by the name. So if you've got the ability based upon the database that you're using in some way, shape, or form to plug in variables from the record, that also really adds to the personalization. It doesn't always have to be something handwritten to be personalized. Other questions, Ryan?
Yes, plenty of them.
Okay.
And this one comes from Rebecca. Can you share examples of other survey questions that could be included for the first-time gifts for major donors?
Yes. What part of this can be a multiple choice or a fill in the blank, depending on how well they know you, but what part of our mission or what projects are you most interested in? And then you list a few to choose from. What is your preferred format for communications? Would you prefer written communications via the mail or via email or a text or something of that nature? Those are two of my favorites that would come into play there, so you can define what projects or what areas, because that segmentation is the most powerful. If you know that your mission is multifaceted and they've got an interest in one or two of the key facets of your mission, you can focus all of your communications on that going forward. Good question.
And the next one comes from Donna, and she asked, we just completed a survey of our mid-level donors, and we're surprised how many of these donors did not appreciate phone calls. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations?
Really? Okay, good. Were the phone calls appeals or thank yous? If they're a thank you phone call, that sort of surprises me, but it may be, you're based upon your constituency, because in most cases, literally, as a board member, I've been asked to make thank you phone calls, and I'm going to guess for every 10 calls I make, I leave 8 or 9 voicemail messages, and I try to make sure that the voicemail messages are 30 seconds or less and are very much to the point of thanking the donor and telling them what the money was being used for to do that. And we really haven't got, for the organizations I've been involved with personally, there really hasn't been hardly any negative feedback regarding that. So if that's the case, I would make sure that you try to ask them further about, was there something about the phone communication that caused the problem, or maybe that was something in the manner that it was being done. Usually that's not the case. One story, Ryan, if you don't mind, I'll share a story. We did a volunteer project, and there may be some of these folks on there. It was with the Boys and Girls Club, and one of my younger employees, as part of the volunteer project, came back and sometime within the next week made a $25 donation to support the project, one of the projects they saw at the local Boys and Girls Club. And she received a phone call 2 days later where someone left a voicemail message thanking her for supporting that project and inviting her to come down and be part of that project sometime in the future. She was so excited about it. Her name was Katie. Katie was so excited about this 30-second voicemail message, she literally played it for almost every employee here at Bloomerang. She went around doing it. I personally got to listen to her message, that phone call she received, and she had been donating. She was in her mid-30s. She had been donating to organizations for, probably the last 10, 15 years. This was the first phone call she had ever received, and she was so immensely excited by it. So I guess different strokes for different folks, huh, Ryan?
Sounds about right.
Any other questions that come to mind there?
Yes. So this one comes from Gary, and he asks, do you suggest a yearly game plan to be developed for major donors? And this is revolving around ways to touch or different touch points. So this would be print, e-contact, personal calls, etc.
Very much so. If someone's made it onto your major donor list, first of all, Gary, the fact that you've designated that is a gigantic first step. Congratulations. Give you and your team a pat on the back there for that. But what you want to do is figure out what are going to be our touch points. And if there's a major donor prospect, I would hope that there's at least 6 touch points during the course of any year to do that. I remember the first time I was designated as a potential major donor. I remember there was some publicity about a business transaction that I had, and all of a sudden I got a call from someone at my alma mater, the university I attended, and the person mentioned and said, I am now there. They were my personal major gift affiliate or officer for that, and that we would be staying in touch with each other. And I can truthfully say there were about 9 or 10 touch points every year, and that's been going on now for about 10 or 15 years. And I think it's paid off. I think I would classify as a major donor to them in most of those years since that time. Got time, I think, Ryan, for 1 or 2 final questions before we finish up the hour here?
Perfect, because we have 2 more.
Okay, let's take those 2, and then we'll call it a day here.
Sounds perfect. And this one comes from Jane. If you've received the gift online and you have the donor's email address, is it okay for all touches to be sent via email, i.e. no paper?
Yes, it is, but make sure your 3rd or 4th touch is a quick 2 or 3 question survey asking if they would like it to continue to be that way, or is there another preferred method of communication? Once again, just the mere fact that whether they answer your survey or not, just the mere fact that you took the time to ask them their opinion is going to put you on a higher pedestal than if you did not do that. Okay, Ryan, our last and final question here, partner.
Last question of the day. We better make it count. So this one comes from Steven, and he asks, you indicated, I believe, that you and your wife gave to 15 causes each year, but it sounded like you received a greater share of your support. Can you discuss with further specifics how you came to those decisions and prioritizations?
Okay. Well, it wasn't that 3 got a bigger share of the support. I would guess if I had to go back and mathematically put it on a spreadsheet or something, probably 5 or 6 get a larger share of our support. And I think that is due to a couple factors for that. Number one, the particular mission or project is very near and dear to the hearts of both my wife and myself for that. Number 2, there has been a relationship built to make us more aware of the impact that our gifts are making for that. And whether you say it or not, I think it's human nature. If you feel like you've got a closer relationship, you're more likely to be able to perceive the impact that you're having within that organization versus another. And so I would give that as the 2 key reasons for that. And believe it or not, one of the other reasons is that those organizations actually ask for a larger gift too, in some cases. So keep that in mind. Sometimes that that magically works, that if you ask for a larger gift to support a particular project that might be in the wheelhouse of somebody, they just might say, that's exactly what I would like to do. Okay, Ryan, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight to be able to share some of the new items here. I'm going to be, you'll see if you come back to the Bloomerang website occasionally, we're going to share more of that research project, but I just got those results literally just a week or two ago, so I'm still waiting for some more of the examples and stuff to come in, so we'll see if we can bolster that in our resource section so people can find out and see some more samples of what was done in those experiments.
And Jay, thank you so much for a great presentation today. And as you all heard, the resources guide that Bloomerang is providing is a great resource to go and find more information about the different studies that Jay's been a part of. You have his contact information there. So if we were unable to get to any questions today, feel free to reach out to Jay. One of the nicest people you'll meet, so he'll be happy to help.
Yeah, I'll be glad. Yeah, if anybody wants to email me, I've got a couple nonprofit board meetings tonight and tomorrow, but I promise you I'll be back with you by early next week at the latest. If you have any other questions, you want to email me.
All right, and thank you so much. And as a reminder,
hey, thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely. And as a reminder, the slides will be coming straight from Bloomerang, so you should be able to see those here very shortly in the future. And you'll also be able to get a copy of the recording by going to the DonorSearch website at www.donorsearch.net. That will, under the resources tab and under the Flash Class library, that will be posted within the next few days. So you'll definitely want to check out the recording again. We can't thank Jay enough again. And to everyone who's going to do a little celebrating and dressing up this weekend, have a safe weekend. And we hope to see you again next week.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.